The year was 1911, and Douglas Mawson, a geologist from Australia, was leading an ambitious scientific expedition to explore and map the largely unknown Antarctic landscape. At just 29 years old, Mawson had already built a reputation as a determined explorer. He had studied geology and natural sciences and was particularly interested in the most uncharted, brutal regions of the world. With a team of scientists and explorers, he set out on a mission to gather meteorological, geological, and biological data about the frozen continent. Mawson's team set sail from Australia and established a base camp on the coast of Antarctica, where they braved the harsh environment to map and collect data. The winter was brutal, with temperatures often dropping well below freezing, but Mawson's team was determined to complete their research. They were faced with relentless winds, unyielding blizzards, and the eerie stillness of the Antarctic ice. However, as spring arrived, Mawson decided to take on one last expedition into the heart of Antarctica to explore the furthest reaches of the continent. In late 1912, Mawson set off with two other men, Belgrave Ninnis, a seasoned soldier and dog handler, and Xavier Mertz, a skilled skier and mountaineer from Switzerland. They were joined by a team of sled dogs, with enough supplies to last them several weeks. The goal was to map uncharted territory and collect scientific data, so they loaded up their sleds with scientific instruments and minimal food rations, relying on the dogs to carry the supplies across the vast, snowy plains. As they journeyed further into Antarctica's unforgiving landscape, the three men faced extreme conditions. The air was dry and thin, their skin cracked from exposure to the cold, and the sun was blinding against the endless white snow. But Mawson remained optimistic, believing that they were making history and contributing to scientific knowledge. Then, disaster struck. On December 14, 1912, Belgrave Ninnis fell into a deep crevasse that was hidden beneath a thin layer of snow. He had been driving the main sled, which was loaded with almost all of their supplies and equipment, including most of their food, tents, and other essential gear. As the sled crashed into the crevasse, Ninnis and 6 of their strongest dogs vanished into the icy depths. Mawson and Mertz were left in shock, peering down into the dark, endless chasm. But the tragedy quickly set in. They had lost not only a friend and teammate but also nearly all their resources needed to survive. With only one sled, limited food, and weakened dogs, Mawson and Mertz knew their chances of survival were slim. They faced a grim decision, to continue forward and hope for rescue or attempt to retrace their steps and make it back to base camp with whatever they had left. Deciding to return, they rationed their remaining food, knowing they would need every ounce of strength to survive the long, grueling trek. As Mawson and Mertz journeyed back, they were forced to make increasingly desperate choices. Their diet consisted of the little food left on the sled, supplemented by dog meat, as they were forced to sacrifice their sled dogs one by one to avoid starvation. The harsh conditions took a toll on their bodies. They suffered from frostbite, malnutrition, and extreme physical exhaustion. The intense cold began to freeze their skin, and their lips cracked and bled. The snow and wind battered them constantly, creating a deafening white silence that felt eerie and endless. But the worst was yet to come. Mertz, already weakened from the physical demands of the journey, began to show signs of vitamin A poisoning, a side effect from consuming the dog's livers. His condition rapidly deteriorated, as he experienced confusion, hallucinations, and intense physical pain. Eventually, in January 1913, he succumbed to the cold and starvation, leaving Mawson alone in one of the most isolated places on Earth. Now entirely alone, Mawson faced what seemed an insurmountable challenge. His body was failing, his hands and feet were blackened with frostbite, and he was plagued by despair. Yet, somewhere within him, a spark of resilience remained. Determined not to perish, he pushed forward, even when every step felt like it might be his last. At one point, Mawson himself fell into a crevasse, dangling precariously above the icy abyss. Exhausted, he managed to pull himself up, inch by inch, fueled by sheer willpower. In his journal, he described the moment, writing that he had never felt more alone. But he continued, covering his frozen, blistered feet in makeshift bindings of wool and bandages, determined to reach the base. Finally, after a grueling journey of nearly 100 miles and more than a month alone in the freezing wilderness, Mawson arrived at the base camp, a shell of the man who had set out months before. His hair had fallen out in patches, his skin was grey and cracked, and he was so weak he could barely walk. His comrades were shocked by his appearance, but they quickly realized the magnitude of his achievement. Mawson had managed to survive a journey that would have killed most others, and his story became legendary. Douglas Mawson's survival became one of the greatest tales of resilience and survival in exploration history. His sheer willpower and refusal to give up in the face of impossible odds made him a hero not only in Australia but worldwide. Today, his story is a testament to the power of the human spirit, reminding us that even in our darkest moments, we can find the strength to endure.